Major League Baseball announced this week that the ABS system will be featured in the All Star Game next week. Feels like it might be a little bit of a test run for the future, does it not? But should the ABS system be here to stay? Let's talk about it next, right here on the PHLY Phillies podcast. What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the PHLY Phillies podcast. Tyler Zulli here, and today I thought the news of the week that made a lot of sense to talk about heading into the All Star break next week was that Rob Manfred and Major League Baseball announced that they will be using the automatic ball strike system as kind of a trial run thing in the All Star game, an exhibition sample size. Quite frankly, it makes a lot of sense. There's not a lot of stock in this game. It's really more for the pomp and circumstance. The outcome of the game doesn't even matter anymore. Back in the day, it used to matter because it dictated home field advantage in the World Series for the winning league, but they don't even do that anymore. So this is really just an exhibition, a showcase of the league's best players, and it's a money-making tool, if we're being honest as well. But this is a perfect opportunity for Major League Baseball to get their feet wet a little bit, do a little bit of a test run with the automatic balls and strike system. Now, the question really is, when it comes to the ABS system, how bad has umpiring actually been? Now, I know that umpiring is a difficult job, and I know that it gets harder and harder every year as pitchers throw harder and have more movement on their breaking balls. But I think with the implementation of both the strike zone box on the screen during pretty much every baseball game and the readily available metrics that are free to use after the game, and whether it be things like replay assistance, umpire scorecard, or something else, I think umpires have definitively come under more scrutiny than ever before. Now, is that scrutiny actually justified? Just how bad have umpires been in recent years? Well, according to Umpire Scorecard and Axios, so multiple accounts have given the accuracy rating for balls and strikes across Major League Baseball to be at about 94%. In fact, one study suggested that accuracy has risen by as much as 3% in the last decade alone. But if you ask the average fan, I would bet you that many would say that the number is lower than 94%. Now, why is that? I don't think it's that umpiring has been awful as a whole, but the bad ones really end up being the ones that stand out because of all of that technology we have readily available. Let's go back to just earlier in the week when the Phillies and the Giants played on Monday night. Phil Cuzzi was behind the dish in this one, and you can take a look at his umpire scorecard just from a couple of nights ago. He posted a 91% in this game, and I would bet you if you asked the average fan what his accuracy rating would be, I bet you they'd say it was lower than 91%. But I think the two bigger numbers that stand out, first and foremost, 15 missed calls in terms of overall accuracy. But the bigger number is the overall factor. A grade of 1.42 runs in favor of San Francisco in that one. That's the detrimental piece to that. That is the reason that Phil Cuzzi has come under such scrutiny over this week and in that game on Monday in particular. And I think the bigger reason is because of the two most egregious misses. And we'll see the next one here in just a second. Here's his missed call box. And you can see called strike accuracy, as we said, 85%. 9 called strikes were true balls, whereas 6 called balls were true strikes. But the bigger problem for the Phillies specifically on Monday night were the two most impactful missed calls were not only by the same pitcher, did not only come in the same at bat, but they came on back-to-back pitches. You see number 2 there, bottom of the 8th, Orion Kerkering versus Matt Chapman. 1-2 count. That first pitch is ruled a ball. It should have been a strike. That would have been strike 3. But not only that, but the very next pitch from Orion Kerkering in the 2-2 count is also ruled a ball in favor of Matt Chapman. It's just an egregious strike zone miss by Phil Cuzzi, and it really did impact the game. And the Giants ended up going on to win the game in part because of these missed pitches. Now, I think the larger scope of the problem when it comes to Major League Baseball and the umpires as a whole, I think there are a ton of good or even very good umpires across baseball, but the bad ones, and I think there still are a handful, even with guys like Joe West retiring and Angel Hernandez kind of being forced to retire, those are the umpires that stand out. You don't know the names of good umpires. You do know Joe West. You know Angel Hernandez. You know Phil Cuzzi, CB Buckner, Laz Diaz, Hunter Wendelstedt. You know these names because they have been making egregiously bad calls now for quite some time with very little accountability. So I'll ask you, do you know any good umpires' names? I knew Pat Hoberg, and the reason I knew Pat Hoberg was because he called a perfect game in the World Series the year the Phillies and Astros played in 2022. Now you know Pat Hoberg for being fired for gambling on the game and passing out information and then trying to hide the accounts and the information that he passed. Pat Hoberg no longer is a Major League Baseball umpire because of it. But I went back and I looked at some of the best scorecards just from the last week alone. Edwin Moscasco, Dan Marzul, DJ Rayburn, and Shane Lavensparger were the ones that stood out. I'll be honest with you. I don't know any of these dudes. And there's probably justification for that is because I think when you think of umpires, you tend to think of the bad ones. And when you get a good umpire, you don't know their name. It's kind of like offensive linemen in football. When you hear an offensive lineman's name, they're either really, really elite or they're the guy that gets called for impactful holding penalties at really, really crucial times. I think the same could be said for umpires. So the question is, should the ABS system be here to stay? I think unequivocally the answer to this question should be yes. Now, I know it's not going to get implemented in the middle of the season. They're not going to find some eureka light bulb moment in an all-star exhibition game and say, hey, coming back in the second half, ABS is locked in. But I do know this. MLB officials, this is according to ESPN, said that 72% of fans that were polled during spring training about the impact of the ABS said their experience was a positive one. 69% said that they would like it as a part of the game moving forward, and only 10% of the fans that were polled expressed negativity towards the ABS system. Now, here's the problem that I think baseball is going to face with the ABS system. When is the right time to implement it? Is it next year? Next year probably makes a lot of sense especially if it's worked in spring training, if it's worked at the minor league level, and if it works in the All-Star game. The problem with that is Major League Baseball's CBA is up at the end of next season. After 2026, MLBPA and the MLB owners and Major League Baseball are going to have to come together to ratify or agree upon a new CBA. And I have said for a while now, I think with the conversations of salary floors and salary caps, things that don't get impacted whatsoever by this ABS challenge, but it will be a part of the conversation, I think are going to slow the CBA collective bargaining agreement conversations down. I have long maintained, this is kind of beside the point, that I think there may be a strike before the 2027 season begins. And I'm not sure ABS impacts that, but I do think it's going to be on the table for the 2027 season. So I don't know if Major League Baseball will necessarily implement it next year, knowing that a new CBA is coming and it's going to be on the table for that conversation. My best guess is that the CBA, when it's up in 2026, will include in the 2027 season the ABS system. And I think that the likeliest scenario is that ABS comes to play after the 2026 season into the 2027 season. But I think it's an unquestionable good. Now, I will say this. Baseball umpires for a very long time have been able to kind of go unchecked with both accountability and their bravado. You've heard the stories this week. We'll go back to Phil Cuzzi for a second about Phil Cuzzi being kind of a vindictive umpire, a guy that if you get aggressive, if you get loud, if you get in his face, will start to call balls and strikes in the other team's favor just in a vindictive manner. You have to be able to separate the umpires from their egos if this is going to work. Because if you challenge an umpire on the call and that you get it right, and Phil Cuzzi looks like he got stood up, I don't want Phil Cuzzi or anybody else impacting the rest of the game because his ego is hurt, because this is a grown man who has some kind of, superiority complex or something, having some kind of issue because you were right and ABS proved you were right, and now he's calling pitches the other way. So unquestionably, the ABS system should be here to stay once it's implemented. I just happen to think that it's going to be after next season. I don't think it's going to come into play next season in 2026. So we'll see what happens. What are your thoughts on the ABS system? Should it be implemented, and should it be implemented quickly as maybe next year? Leave a comment down below. We'll continue to talk about it. This will be a developing story, and we'll see what happens in the All-Star game. We've seen it in spring training. Now we'll get to see it at the major league level, at the exhibition level at least. We'll see when this gets implemented. We'll be back tomorrow with a live show, 1 o'clock on the PHLY Phillies podcast. I can't wait to talk to you. We'll start to look ahead to the Padres series coming up. And of course, we'll start to dive into the first half numbers and grades for each of the Phillies on the 26-man roster. We'll talk to you tomorrow right here on the PHLY Phillies podcast.